ready? Yeah?
Yep.
Yes.
So, hi guys, I'm Carol Lago, and I'm a tech innovation Web3 and strategy advisor at the moment. I've been in the ecosystem blockchain applying to financial sector since the 2016. So I've been involved in several regulation changes across Europe during this time. So it will be a pleasure for me to actually generate some debate in here about sovereignty, which is a very difficult word for me to pronounce because English is my second language, so don't make fun of me. So let's get started. Hope you can introduce yourselves. Catherine.
Thank you very much. I'm Catherine Dodds. I am a partner in a law firm, Gunnar Cook. I am a corporate lawyer, so I do everything from investments to M&A to global restructures. So I help a lot of Web3 projects scale and then eventually exit.
Thanks.
Hi, everyone. I'm Nick Almond. I'm currently, I know it says on here, I'm the founder and CEO of Factory Labs. I'm still the founder of that. I'm still the chief scientist there, but I've currently recently taken a position as head of governance at the Jito network, which is the largest DeFi project on Solana, which creates Jito Sol, one of the largest LSTs. And I've been working on DAOs and decentralized governance for about 9 years now. So I'm kind of old school governance guy.
Hi everyone, Eran Barak. I lead Shielded Technologies. We are the labs behind the Midnight Network. Midnight is a 4th generation blockchain focused on privacy and being regulatory friendly.
Great. Hi everyone, my name is Joanna Rindel. I work as the head of legal at Trilitech. We are a devco to the Tezos blockchain.
Good. Let's start with the first block of questions. I would like for each of you to actually define sovereignty in your own ways, like trying to cover the Web3 communications, individual ways, the community, the protocol level. So Catherine, maybe I was thinking on Catherine and Joanna, and then the rest can continue.
Yeah, sure, I'm happy to take that. So I think when we think of sovereignty, there's 3 layers to it. So there's the individual level, there's the community level, and there's also the protocol level. So at the individual level, it's all about, you know, my keys, my world. So the individual owns the assets. They don't rely on a centralized authority. They get the freedom to choose who they participate with. It's all about the control back in their hands. Whereas in terms of at a community level, it's all about we, the community, kind of governing rules and working towards a common purpose. So that's where DAOs come into play. You've also got decentralized governance, so it's all about the token holders and the members basically voting on decisions. I guess it's not relying on CEOs and boards, effectively. And then at the protocol level, the protocol basically enforces the rules of the protocol. Yeah, so you have like, I mean, Bitcoin's a classic example of that. And I guess the problem, the tension lies, which I'm sure we'll delve into here today, the tension lies is when state regulators get into play at the exit and entry points of the protocol.
The lawyers get to answer the definition question. Yes, I suppose Catherine did a great job as well. And if I can add anything, I suppose the way I also think about it on a high level, if we think about what is the difference between sort of sovereignty when we talk about governments and so on, is that it's somebody else who has been given the power. And when we talk about Web3 and the governance or the self-governance aspect in Web3, it's rather power back to the people, so to say. Like we have, more, like we actually get to participate in the decision making that has to do with our identity, data, and so on.
Okay. I think we need to give them a show, and we got to fight here or something, or disagree, right? No, but on this one, I'm actually going to agree with the folks. I think I'll start with the world is not fair. It's just simply not fair. We've got intermediaries with kind of interests and parties and power. For me, the concept of sovereignty is giving the power back to individuals freedom of association, commerce, and expression, and being able to do that without special interests is where we can give people who are less advantaged, whether it's economically, socially, or otherwise, the ability to govern their own data or activities.
Yeah, I'm agreeing with everyone here. I think I really liked Catherine's approach to thinking of this on different levels. It's actually a kind of fractal concept. It applies at many different levels of society and individuality. So the kind of libertarian view is sovereignty is about personal agency. So I can do whatever I want and no one can stop me. And that's a kind of like philosophical position that has driven much of the crypto space. It came out of a kind of crypto anarchist kind of background, which is about like, don't tread on me, you know, like I'm about personal freedom. And ultimately that's like, crypto enables this in like deeply profound ways. So the ability for people to self-custody assets is like ultimate sovereignty over money and like ownership, if you like. Where I'm sort of interested in it is the kind of level up, where you've got the sovereignty of a group of people. So I'm interested in DAOs, which stands for decentralized autonomous organizations. The A in DAO means autonomy, which is about the ability to self-govern, which is about the sovereignty of a group of people. So ultimately, we now have the technologies for a group of people to be able to self-govern, and potentially even nation states cannot stop them from doing it, whatever it is, which is where it becomes in tension with the highest level, which is the state. And if you remember, like Brexit was all about sovereignty, and that was about sovereignty from the EU. So it's one of these things that abstracts on many levels.
But then, how can you, maybe, do you think that it can coexist with state regulations? Because, I mean,
no,
looking from
actually.
a DAO point of view.
So on some levels of it, it is basically antithetical to state regulation. There are some lenses on which where the point of it is to be able to operate without interference from state regulators. There are many viewpoints in crypto which are effectively, I mean, there are many ways that crypto is unregulatable, as in regulations are about making people perform and behave in a particular way, when the tools themselves enable people to do whatever they want. Like, you cannot stop someone deploying a smart contract to the Ethereum blockchain, for example. You just simply cannot stop them. So you cannot, state regulator cannot prohibit that action because it's a permissionless technology. So these things are in like a hardcore tension. Now, when it gets professionalized and starts interacting with the fiat system, then you can start to think about regulations and what the power relationship is there. But actually, in principle, it's kind of antithetical to state regulation.
But maybe now we can actually jump to the second part of it, which is like law versus code.
Yeah.
So how can you actually focus that maybe and have a chat with Iran about it?
Sure. So I think you first need to ask yourself, what is law, right? Some
But
people, some
what is
people
law, but
live
actually
by their
separated
own,
from state regulation?
Yeah. But some people live by their own code, and then the family has some family rules, right? The homeowner association has some regulation, city, government, state government, national. At the end of the day, I like the concept of code as law rather than kind of written law, because eventually we need to memorialize those concepts in somewhere where the other people participating in our circle know what the rules of the game is. But code is deterministic. Law, as written many times, is open to interpretation by the courts. And then you start having interest groups and ways of finagling things, whereas when code is written, smart contract or other ways, it doesn't differentiate between if you're poor or rich, one sex or another, one race or another, one nationality or another. It is written and everybody has the same understanding. I like that.
Joanna, what you want to say?
So, since we were supposed to debate.
Let's go.
No, I would just say that I think that works to some extent, right? Because I also think that, I mean, as far as you can take it with having clear rules, then obviously that can really help. And I also think that to a certain degree that creates many very interesting solutions, really, or like anything from like an on-chain escrow where you can sort of put in money and then you have, stuff like that, or like as you also said, like we have so much bias, like data bias as well, that definitely helps. But then you also always get to that next level where you can't just determine everything, and it runs into problems. And then I would say that this, let's say, a little bit broader approach to law, so that we have a case-by-case analysis, it can be beneficial to some extent.
So I believe that compliance could be encoded without killing decentralizations. Do you agree or disagree with me on this?
I think that, like, again, I think there's somewhat of an explicit tension in these things, right? So the coder's law sort of philosophy, actually one of the first people who talked about this was a guy called Nick Szabo, who's one of the very early Bitcoiners. Again, hardcore libertarian sort of idea that, we can live outside of, in a kind of illegal space where code can become the new paradigm by which we settle our arguments. And this is kind of Bitcoiner philosophy, right? So Bitcoin sets up this kind of like game theoretical system where you can't cheat on it, and that's a good example of code being the law. The protocol sets the law. You can't break it. And there's kind of, it doesn't fall back to courts and stuff like that, right? Now, there's an argument for this because blockchains exist on this kind of planetary scale that live at a layer above the nation state. So which set of laws do you actually build compliance out for, right? So when you say compliance, who are we complying for? Quite a lot of the time, the compliance is to like leverage the interests of a particular nation state. So for a lot of time, crypto was under the kind of hegemonic control of the America. You're not allowed to do ICOs, which is fundamentally protecting the interests of venture capital and the banks. So I think it raises a very interesting question around who are we complying to and why are we doing it? If you're not careful, you end up in these kind of like supranational structures like the FATF system, which is kind of this AML system that doesn't actually stop any money laundering, but creates worldwide pain for everyone who has to dox all over the place and their data gets stolen and all of this sort of stuff. So again, I think I'm not a kind of code is law guy, actually. I believe you've got to be a pragmatist. I am a British citizen, so I have to comply to British laws, right? So I kind of get both sides of it, but I don't think this tension has been resolved yet, let's say.
No, not yet. I don't think so. So maybe, Joanna, you can jump into this. I want to jump into actually privacy, data privacy, and how can it, who should be accountable of privacy within this supposedly ecosystem?
Go ahead.
Aaron can debate this as well.
Oh, yeah.
So who should be accountable in privacy? I think, honestly, I really think that also kind of depends on, I don't think that there is an easy answer to that. I really think that also kind of depends on how you build the product, because I would say like, so I am personally in favor of like privacy tools that we can have on the blockchain. I do think that they make sense. That's sort of where I stand. I wish that we would have also more like better regulation, especially coming from the EU. I mean, now we have a huge debate on the new GDPR, like the version 2, which doesn't fit with the blockchain. I mean, on a general scale, like doesn't really fit with blockchain like technology at all, because there's been a lot of debate on that as well. And so I think that, yeah, like ultimately, like who should be accountable or how do we build privacy tools is yeah, it's a technology question, very far, like depending on how we build it and what we want to achieve with it, then we can think about accountability.
Okay, I'm going to challenge that. Sorry. No. But I agree to some degree with Joanna and with Nick. When you think about compliance, you need to figure out first whose rules, like Nick was saying, and also what rules apply. So whose rules could be, are we operating here in the UK or in the US or somewhere else? And what rules apply depends on the application we're trying to do. If we're doing a financial DEX, certain rules apply. If we're just building a game, maybe we're unregulated or other rules apply. And then even there are nuances like who is participating in the activity. Is this an accredited investor? Certain rules apply. Retail user, other rules apply. So usually, who is responsible is the party that is operating the application, is expected to comply with the rules of the business activity they're operating and running. What ended up being interesting is that we as builders of technology always thought that meant that whoever's building and operating the dApp, that's their problem. We don't care at the blockchain or at lower layers about all this compliance. That's not our problem, until privacy got in the way. Because once privacy got in the way, we realized that in order to protect not just the data, protect the metadata, we needed shielded tokens. And if you have shielded tokens in order to enable privacy, I can take 100 pounds worth of tokens and give it to Catherine or to Nick here, and we just done money laundering. And suddenly the regulator took very keen interest in the builders who are building a much lower layer of kind of technology. And so now we've gone from a world where it's somebody else's problem to we need to think this compliance through the entire stack.
So, okay, let's add something more to that, and maybe Catherine can help me with this, because we've been covering self-governance versus compliance and privacy preserving, but what if we go into real world assets tokenization? Like, can it be done completely on chain at some point?
The short answer, in my opinion, is no, because it's a real world asset. So the asset itself is on the real world. The value is in the real world. The proof of the asset is governed by the legal system as to where it is, including like the verification. Like there's obviously layers of it that can be done on chain. So when you're tokenizing something, obviously the proof of the fact that someone owns a token, that's done on chain. But I don't think the whole thing would ever be done on chain. Also, you have other things like if in relation to DAO governance, in relation to the actual real world asset product, that can be done through governance on chain, for example, setting the yield or something along those lines. But I don't think we'll ever get into a world where everything is done on chain in relation to real world assets.
So maybe.
And you also have things like law enforcement as well in terms of whether it's a security, which is also always going to be off chain.
So you can actually have on-chain the whole transaction side, and then like a off-chain governance model based on any kind of law. How can we complement? I mean, if we actually want to help ourselves with the advantages of tokenization, but with real-world assets, how can it work, in your opinion?
I think you have to see it as like a layer approach. So part of it would be on-chain, and then part of it would not be. So for example, in terms of giving token holders the right to kind of decide the direction of the product and the yield that it bears, then that's great. That can be done on-chain, but we just couldn't get all of it from a legal perspective done on-chain, done on-chain in my opinion.
So like, for example, KYC part and all those kind of verifications should be doing offline.
I'm sure Erin can jump in about the technology of this a lot more in terms of where we're at in terms of on-chain KYC, but I think we're not quite there yet.
We're getting there. We can definitely provide decentralized digital identity if you provide privacy on-chain, and you can use technologies like zero knowledge to make an attestation about the rights of the user to access. But getting back to the kind of the original question about real world assets, I think it's an evolving story, and I think in the UK, US, and some in MiCA stuff, it's kind of still under development. We were just having kind of a chat outside about an example of if you have a pot of gold, right? If I sell an interest in that pot of gold, clearly that's a security. But if I tokenize that pot of gold and now I give a token, is that a security? Is that a commodity? The answer is, it depends on the jurisdiction and depends on where that regulation is evolving. What is happening, or what we're seeing, is what I like to refer to as regulatory arbitrage, meaning people take advantage of different rules and regulations in different jurisdictions to kind of advance certain stories. My personal favorite, and it's not gold related, I dare to guess some of you have pets. A guy that I met is building healthcare for pets as kind of a tool, because that industry is not regulated. And I asked him, like, why don't you go after, you know, regular healthcare stuff on chain? It's kind of the wish for us all. And he said, that's the arbitrage. I can get in on an industry that is unregulated and then graduate when the regulation catches up to healthcare for humans. That's what we're seeing people doing.
So you just mentioned jurisdiction, and I would like to ask each of you, which jurisdiction do you think that is taking this kind of balance we're trying to get here to solve here in the least wrong way?
I think the biggest day to night, or night to day shift we've ever seen is what the Americans have just done.
Don't say that.
Since well, we've moved from a regime which was overtly hostile, like literally a culture of fear, where the threat of criminalization without codifying the law, hegemonic power, has just flipped overnight into we're massively pro-crypto. So now America are now literally running something called Project Crypto, where they're just trying to ram in crypto laws as quickly as possible. That is probably not a good example of where it's done well, to be honest, because who knows if it's going to flip back the other way and we all go to jail again, right? So the answer is none of them. I think there's interesting pockets of practice emerging. I think the EU are probably entirely in it to protect the monopoly of their forthcoming digital CBDC, the digital euro. So they're actively trying to crush crypto. I think the UK here are trying to just slow it down, and so they don't have to think about it for as long as possible and sitting out of the market, and again trying to potentially like protect Bitcoin or whatever. I think the UAE are doing kind of interesting things. They've got like Emirates that are like sort of free port style places where the real world asset thing might kick off, because they're creating kind of like escrow systems. On the kind of real world asset thing, that comes down to like the Oracle problem. If I tokenize my house and sell it to you, you've got a token of my house. But if I burn my house down, you've now just got a token and no house, right? And so how do you actually connect to the real world is a really fundamental problem that's very difficult. And the jurisdictions that start to open up that kind of thing, allow tokenized ownership in interesting ways. The UAE are doing some interesting stuff on that front. Switzerland, probably. I don't know, but like, yeah, mixed bag.
Maybe, but for me, I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but from my understanding, it's like you're in Europe, at least, you can say that you own the right of that real world asset, but not like the real thing, just the rights of usage. So I don't know, maybe Unique or someone else can compliment me on this.
Yeah, I also think that is probably a discussion that we don't exactly have time with right now, but also something that we were discussing a little bit before this panel, but just that's also an interesting thing, right? Because there is no such thing within the European Union, for example, as like a common property law. Like everyone has a different understanding of property law. Like, I mean, it's a national, like property law is a national law, right? So something that you might have a right, like an ownership right to something in a country and maybe not in another country. So if you bought a right to something in the UK and then, you know, you're in another country, maybe that's not recognized. And so that's also I know there are international initiatives that are trying to work on these things, so we have more uniformed property laws. But yeah, I mean, you have these issues as well. Yeah.
Catherine.
I was just going to say, can I go back to the jurisdiction question? Because it's a good one. So I agree with Nick. Like, I don't think any jurisdiction is getting it right quite yet, but I am excited about Japan in terms of their co-regulation approach in the long term. So they are seeking to try and get the balance between state regulation and decentralized governance. So I think that'd be quite interesting to watch over the long term. Like, they're not there yet. And I'm also, controversial view, quite bullish in the long term on the UK in terms of institutional DeFi, and I think we can be a real leader in the space there. So yeah.
Yeah, I think you got something on that. Actually, you think Japan, like in the next 5 years, which we can say long term, that something like that?
Yeah. There's like both long-term views, because
Yeah.
I really don't think, like, I agree with Nick in terms of you know the immediate jurisdictions right now. You think of like the UAE, Switzerland, but I don't think anyone's getting it right now, and I feel like.
I'll give you one. Well, we're all talking about all the heroes doing it right. Forgive me, Bhutan, if you are out there. I think they did a very nice project on digital identity, but using government-run technology means the government now gets to surveil everything that everybody's doing with this digital identity. That's not the ethos of what we were trying to accomplish. So if you are going to provide digital identity, do that in a decentralized so people can have the sovereignty over their ID.
So it's not actually a sovereign digital identity.
It's a nice
Not fully
story.
sovereign.
If we're talking about digital ID, I think this is probably the worst idea this government's ever put out, which is saying something. Digital ID, if done wrong, as you were saying, if it's done right, it can be a system that allows people to prove aspects of their identity and selectively reveal themselves. We were talking about privacy earlier. The reason why we're all in this room is because of a group of academics in the 90s that called themselves the cypherpunks, who were cryptographers, which were deeply worried about the state assuming a kind of, they literally feared the state dominating humanity at scale. They were very worried about the ability of like mass surveillance and control technologies to literally like crush people. Digital ID enables that. It enables state power to control people at scale. And the way that we're approaching it in this country is we're overtly talking about rolling out a social credit system. We're overtly talking about using it to control. We're effectively saying we're revoking everyone's citizenship until they adopt a technology. The opposite of self-governance, the opposite of sovereignty. So yeah, I think it's a terrible idea, and we should not do it.
Thank you guys. I don't know if we have time, but maybe if somebody from the audience have a question. Oh, yeah. You might need a mic. Yeah.
Can we scale crypto? Can we scale the ecosystem without that need for additional regulation?
I have some thoughts on that. There's the issue with, so I'm actually very pro-regulations for centralized venues. So a huge amount of the people who got full wiped last week were basically down to infrastructure failure in Binance. So Binance just simply stopped processing people's orders. All sorts of stuff happened behind the scenes that was very untransparent, very opaque. And a lot of people were trying to interact with the market and couldn't because they were not processing their orders. And some people in that venue made a lot of money buying tokens that zeroed out. That is just crime as far as I'm concerned. And like those centralized venues should be regulated in extreme ways. Everything that happened in the DEX is like centralized venues shut at 5 p.m. on Friday, and Trump announced that attack on China like 2 hours before market close. And all of the reality happened on-chain. When Binance was down, all of the market happened in DEXs, and it was fully transparent. You can audit every transaction and all of the mechanisms. You don't need to really like force any kind of regulation on that because you can just check the chain. So I think we should absolutely concentrate on regulating centralized venues such as centralized exchanges now, right? And actually, DEXs and decentralized systems are actually far more transparent and better for markets generally.
Thank you.
Is there any other question from the audience? Well,
If not, then I'll add to what Nick was saying.
Iran, sorry. Can we actually use it to like say something to close the panel? Your affirmation? Sorry, but it's like we ran out of time.
Okay, what would you like me to close with?
No, as you like continue that, just
Okay.
say something to
I'll say
conclude.
something quick. I agree with Nick. Some regulation is good. It provides a standard for innovation. It kind of creates a common ground. You just need to be careful. I think there are some efforts like FINRA in the US trying to codify their rule book into code. And so they can easily deploy that into smart contracts and upgrade it later. And that provides not just scale in terms of operation, but scale in terms of evolution into the future. Interesting kind of direction that they're taking.
Thanks, Iran. Joanna.
Yeah, maybe as also closing word, but kind of also just to maybe carry on this. I would also like say that I think that we are seeing, or I wonder if we will see in the future, sort of really like different forms of businesses forming in this, like to what Nick said, like we should definitely regulate, like regulation should be really on centralized players. And there, I don't know if anyone saw, but there was recently an article about how Circle now is planning also to like reverse the transactions. So basically they want to build their service into being more closer to TradFi. So that we're really sort of going to see a shift where we have like really sort of decentralized products, and then we have those like centralized products that really are, I suppose, building even more towards TradFi. So I think that's interesting.
Thank you, Joanna. Catherine?
Yeah, sure. So I think I'm like, my personal mindset is that I'm a bit sick of the, law versus code, decentralized governance versus state regulators, and I'm really excited for the next era where everyone will be working together. I think regulators could do a lot in that field in terms of actually, using blockchain technology to help their purpose. And like, I guess I foresee a world where regulators are thinking more about how can we prevent this and work with decentralized governance rather than just being like all about control and punishing people straight away. Obviously, they're going to need to do it if something goes wrong, but I think there's a lot more that can be done to work together.
So ideally, there should be like a negotiated interface between communities, courts, and code, something like that.
That would be nice. I think.
Ideally.
I think that there's a few things that could be done that would substantially like improve the relationship between regulators and the industry. I think one of the things that would be nice if they said to the industry, go ahead and regulate yourselves, right? Come up with codes of practice, come up with the good standards that come out of the technologies, talk to the builders and say, what do you want, right? What do you think is the good practice? The real good projects and good builders actually care about minimizing user harm and operating successfully. They should ask them and say, why don't you come up with a rule set and see if you can get people to follow it, and then maybe you can inform us. Because the pace at which regulation is created is so far behind the market that they're actually codifying a practice that's long since moved on. It's an accelerating technological frontier, and you just can't keep up with it. They should recognize that. And broadly, I think the sort of that self-governance approach, the market needs to we are doing it, right? So that, like, for example, the EU have just come up with a paper on MEV, which is only talking about Ethereum MEV. It's already out of date, and in the industry, we're creating new technological paradigm for minimizing harmful MEV. The market heals itself, just like you don't see ohm forks that fill up with TVL anymore because the market learns. The market actually self-regulates itself very organically. So I think that's the dynamic that needs to happen. We need to let the industry have a go at it and let the regulators kind of use that and build that partnership relationship collaboratively.
Thank you, Nick. So
We're in agreement, I think.
I think so. I think so.
Tech guy and the lawyer.
thank you guys for keeping up with the conversation. For me, it has been very insightful. Hope the same for you. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.